All right, everyone. Jeremy Knopf here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified Livestream. So we got a great series of segments here today. Got a couple of things we're going to teach you guys, but also got a special guest who's going to have a really cool opportunity for you guys. I know a lot of you are trying to get out into the media, get featured, kind of start building your authority status. And I talked about this opportunity a couple weeks back. Had a little bit of scheduling issues here, but we're going to be joined by a guest who's got a great opportunity for y'all. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into things. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is how to show up in AI tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Grok, Claude. The list goes on and on and on. The point is we all need to be in these tools. We need to be findable, right? So for the last 20 years or so, it's basically been, if you don't show up in Google, you might as well be a ghost. You're a nobody. Now it's getting to the point where if people cannot find useful, relevant information about you in these AI tools, the same applies there. You might as well be a ghost. You're nobody, and it hurts your authority status. So just a couple days ago, I was doing a little bit of research for a client that we were managing a PR crisis for. And typically the way that I would do this is we would go into Google, we would go into Bing, and we would search for their name. And then we would search for their name with various other related terms. And the idea is to find whatever information is out there, positive or negative. And this is all part of the PR crisis management process. We have to know what's out there. We have to know what kind of a person they are. How do they normally conduct business? And we have to know what is there that we may be able to use to our advantage. Also, what is there that could hurt us? So usually when we do this, it could take several hours to conduct all of this research. So I tried to streamline the hell out of the process. And this is just the way that the world works today, right? We have these tools that everyone is using. In a lot of cases, people are using it to supplement what they would normally do on a search engine. But in many cases, they're using it instead of a normal search engine. And it's got its pros and its cons. So what happens here is it kind of opens up a little bit of a Pandora's box. And that is that you have to show up in these AI tools in order to be seen as authoritative and trustworthy, which then, of course, when you are, that helps you to make more money. It helps you to close deals faster, and it helps you to attract opportunities because you're seen as somebody important. So we're going to talk first about some of the ways that you show up in these tools. So, of course, one of them is, these tools are out here crawling the internet. They're looking at the information they find out there. And one of the sources that they use, of course, is your website. But that is towards the smaller end of the scale, right? They don't weigh it with as much importance because, let's be honest, who's going to get on their own website and be like, yeah, sometimes we're pretty good, but other times we kind of suck and we let people down and maybe I don't have that much experience. Like, you're not going to say that. So they take that with a grain of salt to some degree. But it's still important to have a lot of useful information about yourself and about your brand on your website. And then to take it a step further, you want to implement schema on your website. Basically, what schema is, this is a code on the back end, right? It's structured in a JSON format, which basically is a JavaScript. So people don't actually see it. It's just purely there for these automated tools, the search engine bots, the AI bots, all of that. So what happens is you're connecting the dots for these tools. So think of it like entities. So back in the day, it used to be, everything was kind of built around keywords, right? And your name could be an example of a keyword. But now they look at it as entities. So it's not just your name, Jeremy Knopf, for example. It's Jeremy Knopf as an individual, right? Who is Jeremy Knopf? He's an entrepreneur. He's an author. He's a publicist. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He's all these things. Where does he rank in the hierarchy of people within his industry? All of these little details. So schema is basically a way to present that information to these automated bots that are scanning the internet and help them connect the dots as to exactly who you are, what you're involved in, and why you matter. Now, you don't have to be a developer to go and do this, right? It's you certainly can. If you're super tech oriented, you can get into the code and write your own schema and implement it on your page. It's something I've done before. Frankly, it's a bit of a pain in the ass to do it that way, especially when you want to go and try and update it. So what I like to do is, if you're using a WordPress website, you want to use a plugin. There is a plugin that we've been using a fair amount lately. I'll have to look it up later, and we'll drop it into the we'll drop it on the as a comment on the video later. But the plugin basically gives you a nice slick interface where you could just come in here, you can put in the information in some fields, and it will do everything else behind the scenes for you. And it's a free WordPress plugin, so it doesn't cost you anything. In my opinion, it's pretty damn simple to set up. But take a poke around, and if you guys find that you're running into problems with it or you're not quite able to figure it out, maybe we'll do an in-depth session one of these days, kind of walking through exactly how to do that. We did talk about it fairly in depth in one of the private community sessions, where we basically set somebody up and walk through the whole process for their website and set up all the schema. But yeah, if that's something you guys try and you run into problems with it, just let me know, and we'll probably end up doing it in one of our segments on PRD one of these days. The other thing they look at is your social media. Now, just like your website, social media can be gamed. So it's important to have a profile on all the major places, Facebook, Instagram, X. I hesitate to say TikTok because I find that you can't really say anything on TikTok without getting some kind of, warning, community guidelines violation. So I've kind of stepped away from TikTok lately, but I do still have an account there. You want to have all the major platforms that you're going to be using. Then you want to have a decent sized audience. Now, it's not just about follower count. Anybody can buy a bunch of bots, and I do not recommend doing that because it's shit. It will drive your engagement through the floor. It will skew the algorithm in a negative way for you, so don't do that. But you want to build as large of a relevant audience as you can, but more importantly than that is you want these people to be active and engaged. So really spend some time building relationships with the people who are in your audience. Don't just post and then run away and go do something else. Post something, but also go to the people in your circle and engage on their content as well. And that will, it kind of creates this relationship. But then what happens is they come over to your stuff and comment on it. You're commenting on their stuff. That's showing the algorithm that this is two real humans communicating, right? And that's something that the AI tools do look at. So they don't look really at follower count as much. They look more at the engagement. The more engaged your social media audience is, the more likely that you are to show up in these AI tools. The big thing, though, and you have far less control over this, is editorial media features. Now, this could be as simple as some quotes in an article. Maybe you get featured somewhere and they're asking for your insight on a particular topic, and they include a few sentences from you about that topic, right? That's good because there's this barrier to entry. Not everybody is going to get featured in the media. So when you are, it positions you as somebody who is relevant, you're useful, you're authoritative. And because not everybody can get into these, it carries a lot more weight. And all of these AI tools are regularly scanning the media outlets. And when I say media outlets, I mean everything from trade publications to local media to national media like Fox Business and CNN and things like that. So the more media features that you get, the more likely you are to be featured in these AI tools like ChatGPT as well. Beyond the quotes, you also want to try and look at getting interviews. So this is a lot more in depth. Whereas if you're quoted in an article and it's maybe a few sentences here and there, that's one thing. But if they're actually doing a full-on interview talking about you and what you've achieved or something that major that you've done, that's where the magic really starts to happen, both because it's a lot more information, but also because of the environment, right? If an outlet is taking the time to interview you and talk about your expertise and really cover you in depth, that's a signal to these AI tools that you're important. Now, you don't have to be the biggest person in the world. You don't have to be at the absolute top of your industry. But if they're featuring you for your expertise, for something you've achieved, for something that you're trying to accomplish, that sends a very powerful signal to these AI tools. And then contributor opportunities are another great one. So this is great because this is where you get a chance to really shine by sharing your knowledge, right? And this is something that I've talked about a lot. It's part of how I rebuilt my own business and personal brand when I came back off my deathbed, right? I focused on writing for various outlets, and that really elevated me, which also ties into our third segment a little bit later on here today. But this gives you a chance to really put a lot of great information out there. And just like, you know, any aspect of traditional PR, you're getting out there, you're showcasing your knowledge, you're being presented as an authority. The benefit of this beyond the publicity is now it helps you to show up in these AI tools. So there is another aspect, and this is more important than your website, more important than social media, but it's less important than the editorial features. And that's press releases. Now, I will say for a period of time, I hated press releases because they essentially became useless for a bit. So what happened was, at one point in time, press releases were how you got out there in front of the media. You would write a great press release, syndicate it across the wire service, and then other journalists, they would go to the wire service or they would be subscribed to the wire service, and they would get these press releases, and then they would write a story about it. That's not really how it worked for a long time, because eventually we got to a point where there's so many different ways to connect with people. They stopped using that. So I got away from press releases for a while. I've changed my opinion on that a few years ago, but now press releases are becoming even more important because they do play a role in getting into these AI tools. There's a couple of caveats here, though. So the first is that this has to be free of hyperbole. So when you write your press release and you put it out through the wire service, what's going to happen is it doesn't just automatically get published. It goes out to an editor at the wire service, and they're going to look at it. They're going to make sure that it's not making outrageous claims. You know, if you're out here saying, I cured cancer, they're going to want to do a little bit of fact checking and make sure you actually did. If you're out here saying, oh, we just did, 50 million in revenue last year, well, they're going to look into that a little bit. They're not generally going to do as much fact checking as a journalist might, but they are going to look at it, make sure it's not outrageous claims, make sure it's not a bunch of hyperbole, that it's likely real, right? And the other side of this is, don't put out a press release just for the sake of putting out a press release. This was something that was really common in the SEO industry back in the day because it would generate a bunch of links. You know, you put out your press release, it gets syndicated all over the place, and then it's got links in it, which the search engines would find and follow that back to your website, and those links help you to rank. That doesn't really work anymore, so it kind of fell off as an SEO tactic as well. But I want to really emphasize, we don't want to just go and put out a press release just because we think it's going to get us into these AI tools, because often it won't if the story is not actually newsworthy. So I'll give you an example of a not newsworthy story from a terrible client that I had a few years ago. And he comes to me one day and he says, hey, Jeremy, I want to put out a press release. When can we make that happen? Now, we had just started our engagement with this guy. We weren't even a month into it. We had just finished up the strategic plan and we were getting ready to start the execution. So when he came and said he wanted to put out a press release, I was a little bit confused because there's nothing new. Like we talked about everything that you're doing, everything that you've done. So we got on a quick call and he's like, well, I just got accepted into the Forbes Council. And I'm like, well, that's not really newsworthy, right? And if you don't know about the Forbes Council, basically it's a pay-to-play program with Forbes where you can come out here and pay a fee. I don't know what it is now. It's probably a few $1,000s a year. But you're basically paying a fee to write for Forbes. The thing is, you're not really writing for Forbes. The whole program is managed under a third-party company. So it doesn't actually show up in the main Forbes newsfeed. It's like your column is completely isolated. So if you're not sharing those articles somewhere, nobody's going to see them. They also don't show up in the search results. So there's really no value to it other than the fact that the Forbes name is attached to it. And that really is minimal because it's a pay-to-play program. Basically, if your credit card clears, you can write for Forbes. And so people just, it doesn't have a lot of credibility. And then beyond that, there's a great big banner across each article that says that it's the Forbes program and it's a paid type of thing. So, you know, I thought I had convinced him that this was a terrible idea, right? It's not newsworthy. Journalists hate it. If you do this, it's going to make you look stupid. He went ahead and did it anyway. He just wanted to be able to say, oh, I was featured in all these outlets, because when you put out a press release, you know, it gets syndicated, which is very different from being featured. He ended up doing it anyway against my advice, and that ended up hurting him in a very different way. He had an opportunity to be featured somewhere at US News, and when the journalist found out that he had done this, she pulled that interview and didn't include him, and also she ended up blacklisting him. But that's a case where that's not newsworthy. There's nothing newsworthy about being accepted into the Forbes Council, because all that means is your credit card cleared. If you, let's say you had a new product, you launched a new product, generally speaking, that's not newsworthy. If you were asked to come speak at Johns Hopkins University, that would be relatively newsworthy. If you just launched a brand new publication and that publication already had, you know, 100,000 visitors that month, that would be something potentially newsworthy. If you raised a whole bunch of capital, right? Let's just say you were launching a business and you just raised $5 million. Yes, that's newsworthy. But most things that people consider newsworthy are not considered newsworthy by the media industry. So we want to make sure that anything we're putting out in a press release is genuinely newsworthy, because the AI tools are also going to ignore it if it's bullshit. And then beyond that, we want to make sure that it's engaging. And we want to do this for two reasons. One, the more engaging it is, the more likely it is to have real value. So the more likely it is to lead to you being featured in these AI tools. But then beyond that, the more engaging it is, the more likely it is to turn into real media features, right? So a journalist may come across this press release and they may say, hey, this is a really cool story. I'm going to write something about it. We had a fintech company we did something for a while back, and we wrote a killer press release, had a completely different angle than the client was initially thinking. And it was super engaging. Everybody loved it. And it started generating a ton of organic editorial features. In fact, in many cases, we didn't even engage with the journalists. They just saw the press release and then they wrote their own article about the topic. And that's a key example of what happens when you get it right. So press releases can be incredibly powerful in general, but they're especially powerful when it comes to getting into these AI tools. And this is something that we all have to do, because look, everybody is relying on these tools. There was a stat, I don't have the exact number off of my head. I included this in an article that I just submitted to Entrepreneur Magazine, I think on Monday. And basically, I think it was like 35 point something percent. They're expecting a 35 point something percent increase in the use of these AI tools by 2030. So this isn't going away. So if you want to dominate your industry, if you want to be able to close sales more quickly, if you want to have more opportunities, you have to show up when people are asking about you and asking about your industry in these tools like AI, like ChatGPT and Claude and things like that. So definitely jump on this, take the actions you need to do to show up there, and it's going to put you so far ahead of the competition. It's not even funny. Okay, so next up, we're going to talk about how to leverage trending topics to craft a better pitch. And it's worth pointing out that this also applies to content as well. So trending topics, this is something I've talked about a few times. Somebody's already talking about these topics. A lot of people are talking about them. That's why they're trending. This is a concept called newsjacking. People want to be a part of what everyone else is talking about. And the other side of this is that this interest equals traffic. So if you're leveraging these trending topics and a journalist writes a story about that connects you to those topics in some way, then what that ends up doing is that means more people are more likely to go and read that article or watch that news segment. Those eyeballs equal ad revenue for these media outlets. So they love that. So when you're pitching them your area of expertise combined with a trending topic, it has a huge impact on your likelihood of actually getting featured, because they know that it's going to drive more traffic than just your standard run-of-the-mill, industry topics. Okay. But what we have to do is we have to connect the dots. We can't just, pitch something that's irrelevant to us, but try and relate to a trending topic. So there's a few different ways you can do this. One is, of course, cover the topic itself. So this is something I've done a lot with Blake Lively. I've done it with Bud Light. I've done it with Google and WordPress. I've talked about a lot of these topics on social media lately, resulting in, millions upon millions of impressions. And so all of those were basically PR crises. And I broke them down from that perspective. So that's one approach that you can take. Another is an in-depth analysis. So really look at the situation, look what's going on. What does it mean to people? How does it play out? What it means to the audience is huge. So when I was covering the WordPress stuff, we talked about how that was impacting businesses, right? With some of the stuff that the Automatic, the parent company behind WordPress, some of the things they were doing under Matt Mullenweg's, I use the word very loosely, leadership, that was negatively impacting business owners, because they had, for example, they had completely locked out anybody hosted at WP Engine from doing updates. And so that created a massive security risk for everybody. So when you can start breaking down the details of this and how it impacts the audience, that's something that journalists get very interested in. You can also highlight previous predictions. So about 7 years ago, I wrote an article for Search Engine Journal. This was the top publication in the search engine optimization industry. And I basically had predicted literally everything that's happening right now with Google. So if I was to go out and pitch a news outlet, I could use that story, and it still lives on searchenginejournal.com today. I could pitch that story and talk about how, I had predicted all of this and now everything's happening. And then I could maybe use that to say, here's what I think is next. And, that then brings us into our next direction we can go with, is predicting the outcome. So Carol Roth had a great example of this not too long ago, when all of the BOI CTA thing was all over the place. And that was, if you guys aren't familiar with that, it was basically a bullshit law that Congress was trying to pass to force business owners to release all kinds of information that there's really no reason to release. And they never really notified anyone. They started putting the law into place, and there was outrageous penalties and fines for not complying, but they never told anybody about it. So it was a nightmare for business owners. And it was kind of this, oh, well, we're going to do the law. And then, oh, we're going to pause the law. We're not going to do it. And then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So she talked a lot, not only about the topic itself, but also how that would affect business owners, right? What are the financial ramifications? What is the manpower ramifications? What are the productivity ramifications of this? And then you can find ways to connect the topic to your industry. So you look at some of the trending topics that are going on. I'm not a sports guy. A lot of you guys know that. But lately, there's been a lot of trending topics around basketball. So there's some really cool ways that we found to connect the leadership style of some of the, I guess, captain of the teams, kind of how they ran the teams and how they got everybody, going in the same direction, on the same page, all of that. That you can then compare that to business leadership styles. So you're basically taking a topic that has nothing to do with your industry and you're finding a way to connect it to your industry. And that's super engaging because now you kind of tap into two separate audiences and reach even more people. But because it's a unique angle, you're now making it a lot more likely that that journalist is going to take your pitch because you're not just pitching the same shit that everyone else is pitching. So next, we're going to talk about how to find these trending topics, right? We don't want to spend all day on the internet trying to look up every single thing we can find. So we want to go to places where we can find good trending topics and then leverage them into our pitches or our content for that matter. So I'm going to do a little screen share here. Let's see if this works for us. Good. All right, good to go. So the first one I'm going to pull up here is Reddit. And I'm not a huge fan. Chrissy, do me a favor and turn off the QR code up here. It's kind of hanging over the website name and logo up here for me. So Reddit is one place we can find this stuff. Of all of these, Reddit is my least favorite because it tends to be kind of a shit show. Reddit's a little bit of a dumpster fire. Let's do a refresh and see what kind of topics we got here, right? So you're going to find a lot of different topics. What we're going to do here, though, is we're going to go over here to the popular tab in the left navigation. We're going to hit popular. And now we can see some of these trending topics across the top. We can also scroll through some of the stuff down here and just kind of work your way down through. And it's kind of a little bit random. There's not any real categorization per se when you're looking through this. And a lot of the stuff will okay, I have no words for that one. There's no real way to categorize or search by topics as far as I'm aware of. But just scroll through, see if there's anything there that might be relevant for you. You can also look at some of the popular communities as well to see what you might find. So like I said, Reddit is my least favorite of the choices for this. There is a lot of stuff there, but frankly, it's a bit messy. The next thing we could look at is BuzzFeed. So BuzzFeed is, I've always hated BuzzFeed because it's these clickbaity titles, but their use of data is probably some of the best I've seen anywhere. So they know what people are talking about. They know what's trending, and they're creating content very quickly and at a very massive scale about whatever's trending at any given time. And they generate a shitload of traffic because of it. So you can go through here and find a ton of stuff that you can potentially use to connect whatever it is you're doing with trending topics. So you've got the site itself, but then if you go up here to the navigation, we're not sharing. We're not, there we go. Okay. So you've got the main page itself, and then we've also got this trending news tab up here. So we hit that, and now we can see what is currently trending in the news. And you'll see all kinds of stuff, social topics, political topics. You'll see business topics, all kinds of different stuff here. And again, not a lot in terms of categorization. You just kind of have to scroll through the slop and see what you can find. But there's a lot of really good data here. And then I also like to look at YouTube. So YouTube, if we go to our left navigation, we're going to scroll down about 2/3 of the way down, and let's see, trending right here. And so now we can see what is trending on YouTube. So again, a little bit of slop here. You're going to have to kind of scroll through and see what you can find that might be relevant. It's going to be a lot of things related to specific creators for obvious reasons, but you can definitely find some real gems in here. And one of the things I like to look at is look at the amount of views. And then when you go to the specific videos, you can also see the amount of comments and kind of get a sense for what people are saying about things as well. And that gives you a lot of insight as to how you might craft that pitch. Next, we're going to talk about Google Trends. I like this one because Google's a search engine, so they have a ton of data. And there's a few different ways that we're going to use this. So you've got this little bar here, and it's constantly updating some trending topics here. Unfortunately, you will find a fair amount that are not in English. So some of those won't be useful. And then we can just like click these separate little things here. But a lot of things there. You can scroll down through some of these. Here's kind of some insight as to how to use Google Trends. But what I like to do is I go to Trending Now up here in this top navigation. And now you can see you got these handy little charts, show you exactly what the trending looks like. Like, for example, I have no idea what the hell ZSSK is. It trended for a little spike about 3 hours ago, and then nothing, right? So whatever this is, it's probably not a topic I would lean on. But then you look at something like, yeah, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name. But whatever this is, there's a bit more longevity to that, right? A little bit more activity. We can change the amount of rows we have. So we'll do that. Okay, so we'll have to expand this out. Right now it's just showing, oh, you know what? Let's switch this up. We're going to switch the location to, that would probably explain why we have all this shit in here that I can't pronounce. So we'll go to the United States, and you can even break it down by region, state in this case for the US, and then by DMA. So like, for example, you know, major areas like Tampa Bay area would be one where I am, but major DMAs as well. So this is super useful. You can really drill down in here in ways that you couldn't in the first three examples that I gave you guys. But we're just going to go all regions for now. And we can see all of these topics that are trending, right? So, I mean, National Hamburger Day. If you ran a company related to health and fitness, there's probably 1,000 ways you could do something with that. Neil Young, I think he's a musician, if I remember correctly, right? So there's all these different pieces of data. You can even break it down by category, right? So we might go to business and finance, right? SpaceX. If you're a business coach, you might pitch a topic, you know, what we can learn about overcoming failure from SpaceX, right? They just had a story in the news this morning about one of their rockets that failed. So you might pitch something based off of SpaceX failing, which is a normal part of that experimental process, right? We're doing something that's not really been done before. So you could pitch something about connecting, you know, the idea of overcoming failure to SpaceX's failed launch today, right? That's a great way to do that. NVIDIA earnings. I might pitch something about, in my case, maybe something about how AI has kind of taken over the news cycle, and there's a lot of cheap AI chips coming out from China, and that's affected NVIDIA. So I could maybe pitch something related to how maybe NVIDIA needs to take a more proactive PR campaign and run with it to overcome those concerns, right? So there's a lot of granularity here that you don't have in the other examples. So this is something that's really, you can really get into the data. You can really find exactly what you're looking for. And in fact, if you pitch a journalist, and if you do a little, I don't know if it'll show up here if we try this. If we do a little screen grab, yep, it's going to work. So if I wanted to just grab something, if you hit the Windows key and Shift, I think is what I hit, it'll give me the option to do a little screen capture, and I can grab that. Now I've copied that row to my clipboard. I could include that in the pitch. And now you've got quantifiable data. When you pitch that journalist, they're going to be able to see, hey, this is something a lot of people are interested in right now. And that really helps the likelihood of getting that pitch to turn into actual media coverage. So this is super cool, a lot of granularity, and it gives you a lot of data to work with. And then the last example we're going to show is X. So I love X. I'm on it a lot, as Tommy can attest, who will be joining us here in a little bit. But X has this cool little section under the Explore tab. And then we can go to trending, right? And now you can see what is trending on X at any given time. And then you can also pop over into news, sports, entertainment. But this gives you a lot of other data about what's specifically trending on X. And again, this is an example where a lot of journalists are on X, so they are going to see people talking about these things. So if they see a whole bunch of people talking about Survivor and you pitch them something related to Survivor, right? Again, maybe we'll go with the business coach example again. You know, maybe you're talking about lessons learned from Survivor that apply to running a business. If that journalist has seen a bunch of people talking about Survivor and you pitch that to her, there's a good chance that turns into something. And again, same applies here, right? That Windows key and Shift, and then we can copy that, and we could even include that little screenshot in our pitch. So these are some really cool tools that we can use to back up our pitches with legitimate data that is going to help. It's going to make for a more engaging pitch, but it's also going to help us to get the journalist on board, get them excited about what we're pitching, and really show that we've got a topic other people are going to be interested in and want to talk about and read or watch and share. And that's what they're looking for, right? They want those eyeballs. They want people coming to the site. They want people watching the show. So this is huge. I've used it a bunch. It really helps to get everything across the finish line. So I highly encourage you guys to use this. It's frankly one of the most powerful tactics that you can find when it comes to public relations. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about how to land your first column at a media outlet. So we're going to start by talking about why we want to do this. So, of course, we all create content on social media to some degree, or at least most of us do. We all should be. But there's only so much weight that your own social media is going to carry. But if you're featured in another media outlet, even if whether it's you being quoted or you sharing your knowledge directly as, a contributed article, that's demonstrating that you've passed a certain bar, right? You are somebody who has enough knowledge and insight and importance so that another media outlet wants to take their time and resources to put your information in front of their audience. They think it's going to be that valuable. Now, this played a big role in me coming off of my deathbed and rebuilding my own business and brand several years ago. Basically, what I did was I first wrote a few really killer articles on my own blog. Then I used those articles to pitch a couple of big podcasts in my industry to come on as a guest and, share that insight there. And then I used those podcasts, which, by the way, it was some of their most highly downloaded episodes. I then used those podcasts to pitch me writing an article for first Search Engine Journal and then later Search Engine Land. And then from there, everything just kind of opened up. I was in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Inc., like every possible media outlet you can imagine. But it all started with getting featured in other media outlets from the perspective of me writing at those outlets. And that creates a third-party credibility because somebody is vetting me. Somebody is verifying that I know what the hell I'm talking about and that my knowledge is solid and the advice that I'm sharing is useful for their audience. So it doesn't have to be the biggest publication in the world. It doesn't have to have tons and tons and tons of traffic. It just has to be a legitimate media outlet. And the other cool thing about this is that's also going to play a role in what people see in the search results when they search for your name. So one of the topics I've talked about from time to time was controlling the search results, right? Taking a direct effort to control what shows up when people search for your name. Well, think about this. If you write for a publication, how does that usually play out? You've got the articles themselves, but then you've also got an author page. And that author page has a little excerpt of your article. It has the title. It has a little graphic usually. And so that author page tends to rank very well for your name, especially the more that you publish. So this has so many benefits. And in my opinion, it's a fairly low effort activity, right? I find it very easy to write. I can usually write a 1,000-word article in about an hour. But even if you're not a great writer, it's something that's relatively easy. Even if it takes you a few hours, the value from this is immense. Now, I do want to point out, do not use ChatGPT or any of these AI tools to write your articles, because first of all, it's going to sound like shit, right? Even if it writes it fairly well, it's still going to be clear that it was written by AI. But then beyond that, it doesn't really have your soul. It doesn't have your personality. And if it doesn't have that, it's not going to be very engaging. So if you're going to do this, just sit down and write the damn article. It's not difficult. It'll take you some time, but it's well worth it. And the effort is far exceeded by the output that or the outcome that it produces for you, right? We talked about the third-party credibility. We talked about the search results. We talked about the exposure, right? That's all very valuable. So, and there is one other thing I'll add is typically you have the ability to link to your own content, whether that be your website, a YouTube channel, social media profiles, whatever, whether it's in the article or it's in the bio. And that's valuable for a lot of different reasons. It helps with your SEO. It also helps drive people back to the assets that you own and control. So it's a huge benefit there as well. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull up a friend of mine, Tommy Gabriel here. Chrissy, if you can go ahead and put on Tommy's camera. So Tommy is a friend of mine, comes from the media industry, great guy. And he recently launched his own publication, a news outlet called Based. Oh, what the hell was it called, Tommy? Refresh my memory.
BasedNewsNation.com.
There we go. Thank you. All right. So Tommy and I were talking a few weeks ago about this, and he is currently looking for new authors, new contributors. So it's not a paid gig, but you guys have the opportunity to write great content for his news outlet, and you get that exposure. You get that third-party validation. You get that, the links to your site. You get all of that. And all you really have to do is share your expertise on the things that you're already an expert on. So, Tommy, thanks for joining us today, brother.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man. So let's talk a little bit about what inspired you to launch this media outlet.
Yeah, so, from my own content creation that I've done in the past on my social media and, mentioning sources of where I'm getting these stories from or news or wherever, I was always sharing other publications, TMZ, Daily Mail, other publications like that. And I thought, well, why don't I have my own? Why don't I bring the traffic to me? And kind of monetize that and make that into something. So I decided to do that, and here we are.
Love it, man. Love it. And you're off to a hell of a start, man. I've been kind of watching it from the first day that you said, hey, it's up now, finally. And I see every day there's a little bit more content there. Love the progress. It's coming out great. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of content you're looking for.
Yeah, so definitely when it comes to content that I'm looking for, it is a mixture of a few things. It could be a reaction or a response or commentary about political stuff. It could be news that's happening, trending news, and it also could be pop culture. So those are the kind of, topics and areas that I'm looking for content for. So that's kind of what my publication will be known for those areas.
Awesome. And I know you and I have a particular political leaning. Are you open to everything across the spectrum, or are you looking for just a particular direction as far as that goes?
I'm open to both sides. It's, obviously, as long as it's nothing too crazy or something outrageous.
Yeah, that disclaimer
But
has to be made these days, huh?
yeah, so definitely it could be from either side. That's fine.
Awesome. All right. And let's talk about, from your perspective, specifically for your outlet, what makes content good, right? What is going to make a piece something that you're going to want to publish versus something that you won't want to publish?
Definitely if the story has value and it has something that makes sense to what's happening on currently going on now, or related to someone known, or has, data backing it. I liked what you talked about previously about um how to find data and find sources and that type of thing. But I have to say that that would be most important to have.
Awesome. All right, guys. So what I'm going to do here, Chrissy, go ahead and pull up Tommy's email on the screen for everybody. We're going to drop this into the Facebook group as well. But if you guys want to have an opportunity to write for Tommy's media outlet, which I highly suggest you do, it's a great opportunity to get yourself out there, and you're getting in on the ground floor, right? This could be the next huge media outlet. I bet, you know what? We'll have to bring you back on in 6 months to kind of see what kind of progress you made. Based on what I'm seeing so far, you've got an amazing trajectory. But, for everybody watching, everybody listening, I encourage you guys to reach out to Tommy, pitch him a story or two, right? It could be something kind of based on current events. It could be based on something that you guys have, an expertise that you have that you think would be useful for people to know about, right? It could be something related to your industry. It could be related to something in the news, whatever. But his email address is down here on the screen, personal@tommygabriel.com. And go ahead and pitch him a story or two and start getting out there, getting your name in the media, and start building that authority status. It's a great opportunity, and I encourage you guys to jump on this. Tommy, thanks for joining us today, brother.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. All right, so let's see. We'll go ahead and remove that. All right, so what we're gonna jump into Jeremy's PR PSA, and that is AI is the new frontier for public relations. So you need to be proactive in ensuring your brand shows up in the LLMs that power these AI tools. So, like I said at the beginning, we're in a world where traditional search engines are going away. They're not gone yet, but it's not going to be too far off. Everybody now is going to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, whatever, and they're getting their answers there. So if you're not showing up in these platforms when they're looking for something, there's a good chance that you're not going to have the authority status that you may have now. Or if you're starting out and you don't have it yet, you're not going to develop it. So you have to get out here, get featured in the media so that you can start showing up in these LLMs. So that when people search for you, they're getting a good solid impression of you. They're getting a good picture of your expertise and what you're capable of and what you can do for them. This is critical. And the people who get in on this early are going to dominate, while the people who don't, the people who kind of put it off as, oh, I'll worry about that later when everybody's already, using these tools, and when the search engines go away, then I'll worry about it. That's way too late. You need to get in early, get that massive competitive advantage, and put yourself ahead of your competition. So that's going to be a wrap for today, guys. If you found something valuable in this, I would love it if you'd share this on social media. Go ahead and hit that QR code with your camera. And if you're not already in our Facebook group, go ahead and join us there. And then you'll see a lot of, obviously, the information we're sharing on the PRD Lives, but also you'll get other information that we share in between each of the weekly episodes. And we share some cool stuff from time to time in the group that you won't see on the live streams. So I encourage you guys to check out that group, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.